Imagine you're a passenger on a routine flight, just moments from landing. You can feel the gentle descent, the familiar sound of the landing gear locking into place. The runway is right there, a perfect ribbon of safety. This is the incredible story of Ryanair Flight 4102. An 8-month-old Boeing 737, a routine flight and a sudden crisis that turned a survivable bird strike into a terrifying crash landing. Why did the captain make a decision that nearly destroyed his plane? The answer lies not in a mechanical failure, but in a powerful, primitive human instinct that can override even thousands of hours of training. Our story begins in the pre-dawn darkness of November 10, 2008, at Frankfurt Airport in Germany. Ryanair Flight 4102 was preparing for a routine flight south to Rome, Italy. The aircraft for the 1 hour and 50-minute journey was a Boeing 737-800. This wasn't just any plane. It was practically brand new, having been in service for only 8 months. It was a state-of-the-art jet, the workhorse of Ryanair's massive fleet. The airline had built its reputation on these reliable aircraft and had an excellent safety record, flying for nearly a decade without a single serious incident. On board were 166 passengers and a crew of 6. In the cockpit, 2 men were at the controls. The captain was a 44-year-old Belgian citizen, a true veteran of the skies. With almost 10,000 hours of flying experience, over half of that in the 737, he was the picture of confidence and competence. He knew this aircraft inside and out. His partner for the flight, the first officer, was at the very opposite end of his career. A 23-year-old from the Netherlands, he was fresh-faced and eager, having been with Ryanair for just 6 months. With only 600 hours of total flight time, he had a fraction of his captain's experience. This dynamic, the seasoned veteran and the promising newcomer, set the tone for a calm, professional flight. After a smooth takeoff, they climbed into the dark sky, heading south as the sun began to rise. The flight itself was completely uneventful. As they began their descent into Rome's Ciampino Airport around 7:20 a.m., the sky was a brilliant, clear blue. The captain, looking to give the new first officer some valuable hands-on experience, offered him the chance to fly the final approach manually. This was a gesture of mentorship, a common practice to build a new pilot's skills and confidence. The first officer accepted, and everything went perfectly. He expertly lined up the modern jet with the runway, his input smooth and precise. The captain provided quiet guidance, making minor suggestions to keep the approach perfectly stable. The air traffic control tower radioed, cleared to land, confirming the winds were calm. By all accounts, this was a textbook landing in the making. As the plane descended through the final few hundred feet, the automated voice in the cockpit announced, "Minimums." This is the final decision point, the last moment to choose between landing or aborting. Both pilots calmly confirmed their intention. They were landing, or so they thought. The runway was now just seconds away. The ground rushed up to meet them, the details of the airfield becoming sharp and clear. From the cockpit, it was a familiar, comforting sight. Then, at just over 100 feet above the ground, everything changed, seemingly from out of nowhere. A dense flock of starlings erupted from below, directly into the path of the aircraft. The first officer would later describe it as a black cloud that instantly blotted out the view. In that critical moment, the captain's veteran instincts took over. He didn't hesitate. He didn't confer with his co-pilot. He shouted, his voice laced with urgency, "Go around! Go around! Go around!" 10 times in quick succession. He grabbed the controls from his first officer, shoved the 2 engine throttles to their forward stops for maximum power, and began raising the flaps to reconfigure the plane for a climb. This was the go-around procedure, a maneuver designed to get them away from the ground and back into the air safely. But it was too late. At the exact moment the engines spooled up to deliver their immense thrust, the plane plowed directly into the dense flock of birds. The engines didn't just hit the birds. They inhaled them. Instead of the powerful roar of a climb, the pilots heard a series of sickening, violent bangs from both sides of the aircraft. The engines choked, sputtered, and went silent. The thrust they desperately needed to climb vanished. The plane wasn't going up. It was going down, fast. Realizing the go-around had failed catastrophically, the captain's mind switched instantly from climbing away to just surviving the landing. He was now wrestling with a powerless 70-ton glider. He pulled back on the control column, trying to keep the nose up and soften the impact. But with no engine power, the aircraft was flying too slow. The wings were losing their ability to create lift. An alarm, known as the stick shaker, began to vibrate his controls violently. A desperate warning that the plane was about to stall, to literally fall out of the sky. It impacted the ground hard, about halfway down the runway, descending at a brutal 1,000 feet per minute. The first part to hit was the rear of the plane and the main left landing gear. The gear couldn't take the force. It shattered and collapsed instantly. The left engine slammed into the pavement, grinding along the concrete in a shower of sparks. The pilots fought to keep the crippled plane straight, using every tool they had left: brakes, spoilers, and the tiny bit of residual thrust from the failing right engine. The jet skidded to a halt just 50 meters from the end of the runway. A mangled wreck, but miraculously in one piece. Inside the cabin, chaos had erupted, but the crew's training kicked in. They quickly evacuated all 172 people. Incredibly, only a small number suffered minor injuries. Everyone had survived, but their aircraft, the modern, 8-month-old Boeing 737, was a write-off, so badly damaged it would never fly again. When investigators from Italy's Civil Aviation Authority arrived, the initial cause seemed obvious. A massive bird strike had brought down the plane. They meticulously counted over 86 separate bird impacts on the aircraft's frame and engines. But as they dug deeper into the flight data and cockpit voice recorders, a far more troubling picture emerged. The real story wasn't just about the birds. It was about the captain's split-second decision. They asked the critical question: why did he try to go around? The analysis of the flight data was shocking. The bird strike occurred just 7 to 8 seconds before the plane's wheels would have safely touched the runway. The investigators ran simulations and concluded that if the pilots had simply done nothing, if they had continued the landing as planned, the outcome would have been completely different, with the engines at a low power setting for landing. The bird strike would have certainly damaged the fan blades at the front, but it likely wouldn't have destroyed the engine's core. They could have landed, perhaps with a bit of a shudder, but safely. The crash was so violent precisely because of the go-around attempt. Pushing the engines to full power created a massive suction force that pulled even more birds deep into the machinery, causing catastrophic, irreversible damage. The captain's action, intended to save the plane, had in fact doomed it. He had inadvertently turned a manageable problem into a full-blown emergency. So why did an experienced captain with thousands of hours make such a catastrophic choice? When interviewed, the captain defended his decision. He explained his thought process. The plane was heavy. The runway in Rome was shorter than most. They had a slight tailwind, which would increase their landing distance. He was worried the birds had already damaged the landing gear or brakes. He feared that if they landed, they might not be able to stop in time and would overshoot the runway. A go-around, he argued, seemed like the safest option. It would give them time to climb away, assess the damage, and plan their next move. He summed up his philosophy by quoting his training: "In case of doubt, go around." But investigators believed something more primitive was at play. They pointed to a powerful psychological phenomenon known as the startle effect. This is an automatic, instinctive reaction our brains have to a sudden, shocking, and life-threatening event. It's the fight or flight response. hardwired into our DNA from millennia of survival. It bypasses rational thought for a few critical seconds, favoring pure, instantaneous reaction. The evidence for this was written all over the data. The shouting, yelling, "Go around 10 times" is not a standard procedure. It was a clear sign of shock and panic. The flap mistake. During the frantic go-around, the captain set the flaps to 10 degrees, not the standard 15 degrees required for the maneuver. When investigators asked him about this, he didn't even remember doing it. It was a purely instinctive, incorrect action made under extreme stress. The investigators concluded that the captain wasn't making a calm, calculated decision based on the factors he listed. He was reacting instinctively to the terrifying, unexpected sight of a black cloud appearing in front of his plane seconds from safety. His brain and his body had been hijacked by the startle effect. The ultimate root cause, they determined, was a critical gap in training. The crew had never been trained for this specific, terrifying scenario, a massive bird strike at extremely low altitude. And they had certainly never been trained on how to recognize and manage the powerful grip of the startle effect. The captain was flying blind, relying on pure instinct. And in this rare case, his instinct was wrong. The crash of Ryanair 4102 was a destructive and terrifying event. But it served as a crucial wake-up call for the entire aviation industry. In its wake, both the aircraft manufacturer Boeing and the airline Ryanair made immediate, sweeping changes to prevent this from ever happening again. Boeing added a new, explicit section to its official 737 pilot training manuals. The guidance is now crystal clear. If a bird strike happens during the final moments of an approach and a safe landing is still possible, the preferred option is to continue and land. Pilots are now taught to keep engine power as low as possible to minimize the chance of catastrophic ingestion. Ryanair, for its part, completely overhauled its pilot simulator training. They introduced new surprise scenarios designed specifically to train pilots for the unexpected and help them build a resistance to the startle effect. In the safety of a simulator, pilots would now be ambushed with challenges like a double engine failure from a bird strike on final approach, a bird strike during takeoff that forces them to turn back for a powerless glide approach. Even a scenario, inspired by the miracle on the Hudson, that required ditching the plane in a river. The goal was to make the unexpected expected, to build muscle memory that could override the brain's initial panic response. The final accident report recommended that all airlines worldwide adopt this kind of training. The lessons from that day in Rome are now part of the DNA of modern pilot training. Every accident, tragic as it is, contributes to a pool of knowledge that makes flying safer for everyone. The crash of Flight 4102 proved that the most complex element in any cockpit isn't the technology, it's the human being. And thanks to the lessons learned, those humans are now better prepared than ever to conquer not just the challenges of the sky, but the challenges within themselves.